In this video, we're going over some of the very rare but weird magical items you can find in D&D 5e. Just like with the other magic item rarities, we'll be covering items which either change how certain rules normally function, or just have wacky effects that you normally don't see, while also trying to figure out fun and unique ways to use these items inside of the campaigns. And starting us off at number 10, we have Mirror of Life Trapping. If you're familiar with the story of Snow White, then a lot of this might feel very reminiscent of a certain mirror with similar properties. It stands tall at 4 feet and weighs 50 pounds, and sports an AC of 11, 10 hit points, is vulnerable to bludgeoning damage, and can be activated or deactivated by using your action to speak a command word while you're within 5 feet of it. However, unlike the mirror in the aforementioned fairy tale, this mirror doesn't tell you who the fairest of them all is. Instead, any creature that isn't yourself or construct that sees its reflection in the mirror while it's activated and within 30 feet of it must pass a DC 15 Charisma saving throw or be trapped inside of it, along with anything that the creature is currently wearing or carrying at the time. However, if that creature is already aware of the mirror's magical nature, then they make the saving throw with advantage. A creature trapped inside will find themselves inside one of the mirror's 12 extra dimensional cells, which are infinite expanses of space filled with thick fog that reduce visibility to 10 feet and basically halts any aging or food, drink, and sleep requirements while inside. As for how a creature can escape this extra dimensional cell, well, one way is by having a means of planar travel, such as through the use of the 7th level spell, Plane Shift. Outside of that, however, the only means of escaping is by having the mirror shattered, which will also free any other creatures that were trapped within the mirror, or by having the one that activated the mirror set you free, either willingly or randomly if the mirror happens to be full when a 13th creature is trapped inside the mirror, in order to make space for the newest prisoner. And as for what one can do with the creature that's trapped inside the mirror, you can speak a trapped creature's name, or cell number if you don't know their name, and have their image appear on the mirror surface, which can allow you to converse normally with them. This can be very good for interrogating members of a group you might be going after, or as a general defense mechanism for you and your party's home base against potential intruders. It could also be used as a rudimentary form of time travel if you could find someone willing to put your entire party inside until someone finds it someday and sets you free, but probably not the best idea for a multitude of different reasons, with boredom and insanity being two of them. All in all, this item probably works best for villain characters or NPCs that want to lead the party or key NPCs into a trap inside of the mirror rather than being something to give your players, due to how heavy the mirror is, making it very tough to simply lob around without the help of a caravan or something. As for the reason the Mirror of Life Trapping takes number 10 spot on this list, it's because it's one of the only magical items, if not the only one, that basically takes creatures out of the game forever, so as long as none of the conditions for escaping can be met. If you were to use this mirror on a group of bandits by leading them to the mirror and fail their saving throws when looking at the reflections, for example, then those bandits will be forever trapped inside the mirror with no way to get out. And if you find a safe place that no one can ever find for the mirror, then those bandits are just going out of the game forever if you choose to not interact with the mirror ever again. But you know what you can interact with? Is cybersecurity with NordVPN. NordVPN is one of the best in the business at keeping you all safe online, just like they do for me. In this day and age of constant security breaches, Nord is the app that'll keep you and your online activity safe. Nord has the best and fastest VPN on the planet. Believe me, I've tried a few and nothing compares to Nord's. I've used it almost every single day, and with every single click it'll change your online address from where you are to wherever you want to be so your location is safe and secure. With one tap, I can change from being in the US to being in the UK. Cybersecurity these days is so important, and that's where Nord shines. With its features like Nord's MeshNet, where you can safely connect to any device in the world, no wires needed. And for my viewers, Nord has a special deal just for you. Using my special link, every purchase of a 2-year plan gets you 4 months for free. Get this deal using this link or the one in the video description below. And of course, NordVPN has data scanners or Nord's threat protection, keeping you safe from any hackers, malicious websites, malwares, phishers, all that nasty stuff. So once again, please use my special link to get 4 months free with the purchase of a 2-year plan. Nord has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you know you can trust them. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring the D&DLogs, and now let's get back into weird items. And at number 9, we have Devlin's Staff of Striking. This weapon has the benefit of, while attuned to it, being a plus 3/4 staff that comes with a total of 10 charges attached to it. With these charges, you can augment the damage you deal to your target's hit with a melee attack, allowing you to deal an extra 1d6 force damage per charge you expend, but only up to 3 at a time. These charges recharge at a rate of 1d6 plus 4 per dawn, and if you expend the last charge, you roll a d20 to make sure it doesn't lose its magical properties by rolling a 1. This is actually a really good item to have on someone that likes to use quarterstaffs as weapons, such as monks due to being considered a monk weapon. And being able to add up to an extra 3d6 force damage whenever you hit, as long as you have charges available to do so, is especially powerful, since the amount of creatures that resist force damage are very few, making this an excellent weapon for martial classes. And being a +3 weapon, it means it'll hit more often and deal a bit more damage with every hit, which is always a nice bonus to have. But while these benefits are definitely nice to have, they aren't exactly special or out of the ordinary. There are plenty of magic items that give damage bonuses and bonuses to hit, which all operate on a charge system similar to this one. Instead, what makes this magical item strange is its second effect, which we'll go over now. So, when you attune to the staff, you basically slowly start to morph into a goat-like humanoid hybrid over the course of 3 days. The process is somewhat lax by first introducing shaggy fur all over your body on the first day. However, after the first 24 hours, your eyes change to be more goat-like and start to sprout horns. And on the third day, the transformation completes by having your fingers and toes meld into double digits, while your horns become fully grown. For the most part, this transformation is mostly cosmetic, as you'll still be able to use weapons and cast spells when needed. However, you might have to deal with social repercussions instead. The good news though, is that you can restore your original appearance by any means that can end a curse, such as remove curse or greater restoration spells. This is technically only temporary, unfortunately, as you would need to do this every time someone attunes to the staff. So as long as you don't unattune to the staff and reattune to it, you should be safe from the transformation. Outside of that, the only way to actually prevent the staff from transforming its use into a goat-like hybrid is to remove the transformation effect altogether using the wish spell, or be a tiefling, since they are the only ones who are fully immune to the secondary effects of the weapon. Despite this, however, Delvin's Staff of Striking only sits at the number 9 spot on this list, because the transformation effect doesn't really affect anything other than your appearance. It's not something that changes or messes with the mechanics of the game or campaign, and the transformation doesn't have much use outside of combat. It's just a really good staff that just happens to have a strange transformation effect attached to it. And coming at number 8, we have the Last Stand Armor. This is magical armor that grants a +1 bonus to your AC and contains the fairly unusual effect of banishing celestials, fae, and fiends within 30 feet of you that fail a DC 15 charisma saving throw back to their home plane whenever you die while wearing this armor, destroying it in the process. There are a lot of different kinds of magical armor which grant some unique benefits while you wear it. However, it's extremely rare to find a piece of armor, or even magical items in general, that play with the death mechanics of the game at all. Most things in the game that deal with death are usually tied to spells or mechanics, such as resurrection spells or most of the features tied to the Zealot Barbarians. The very existence of Last Stand armor is weird purely on this alone. As for the effect that the armor has whenever you do get to activate it, well, a DC 15 charisma saving throw isn't something to scoff at under normal circumstances. However, many celestials, fae, and fiends tend to have higher charisma scores at higher levels to help compensate for the fact that many banish type spells and effects are charisma based, which might make it difficult to use this armor effectively. The main purpose of this armor is to hopefully be able to send 1 or 2 of these creatures back to wherever they came from to make it easier on your allies that might still be in the fight, rather than trying to take out the entirety of a large group with you. For that reason, you would definitely want to avoid charging into the middle of a group of hostile fae in the hopes that they all get banished. What's even more strange about this item is the fact that it does get destroyed if you die, which is pretty detrimental for a magic item that's supposed to be of very rare quality. And while you could try to use something like the mending spell to try and fix it, depending on the size of the armor, the spell would not be able to restore the armor's magical properties and would just be regular armor. So, unlike other magical armor you can get, the Last Stand armor wants you to find a good way to destroy it to make the most use of it. However, you also don't want to use it all the time since you might accidentally die while in the presence of creatures that can't be banished by the effects of the armor. Overall, the Last Stand armor is a pretty fun and unique piece of gear with a unique effect that not only plays with the death mechanics of the game, but is also a very rare item with a fairly powerful one-time use effect that can save your party's lives in very certain situations, which is why this is number 8 on this list. And at number 7, we have Nolzur's Marvelous Pigments. This is a set of magical paint that comes inside 1d4 pots and allows you to paint 3-dimensional objects in 2-dimensional space, where the object will then become reality, kind of like a magical 3D printer that you can carry around with you. So, if you were to paint a door on a wall to another corridor, then that door materializes and opens to that corridor. Or if you were to draw a quiver of arrows, then the quiver will become real along with the arrows inside ready to use. The only downsides are that whatever you create with the pigments can never exceed a value of 25 gold. While this doesn't make the creation fail, it does make it so that a diamond you paint actually turns out to be a phony gemstone made out of cheap materials if it's inspected closely, rather than an authentic one. However, anything you paint that is worth less than 25 gold is purely authentic and can possibly be sold for monetary gain. And while there are technically ways you can exploit this to make a large amount of money, such as drawing individual pieces of gold instead of a pile, This would most likely fall under the category of unintended exploits, and might not be allowed in your game for that reason. To further explain this, the term object of greater value could reasonably be interpreted as either an object that's worth more than the stated value of 25 gold, or it could simply be talking about the type of item itself. A gemstone could be considered an item of greater value regardless of worth due to the cost and effort it might take to actually make, for example. Technical shenanigans aside, however, Nolzur's marvelous pigments has so many uses outside of making money. You can use it to make repairs to someone's house that might be falling apart, provide ladders, a rope, and other necessities your party might need in order to traverse dangerous areas or dungeons. You might have run out of lockpicks and need to create more, or perhaps need a container to carry out more loot instead of making multiple trips or leaving some of it behind. You can paint traps for your enemies to fall into, or peek at enemies on the side of the wall by making peep-sized holes to look through. You might even temporarily fool a dragon by drawing a fake pile of gold as a distraction while your party sneaks or runs away to safety. The possibilities are endless, so long as you have pigments left over, and the only limitation is the player's ability to get creative when using this magic item. As for the reason this item is never set on this list, it's mainly because very few items can just create things on a whim. The concept of turning your paintings into real things is both unusual and awesome for any character with a knack for art, but not so unusual that it should be any higher on this list. And at number 6, we have Arcane Propulsion Arm. This is a magical prosthetic arm that can only be attuned to a creature that's missing a hand or arm. And just like a normal prosthetic limb, you can use your action to remove the arm yourself. However, it cannot be removed against your will. Otherwise, it remains attached to you until your attunement to the arm ends. But unlike a normal prosthetic limb, the biggest benefit of using this item comes from the fact that you can actually use it as a melee weapon during combat. It counts as a magical weapon that you're proficient in and deals 1d8 force damage on hit, while also possessing the thrown property. The normal range on this is 20 feet with a long range of 60. And when you choose to throw the weapon, it detaches from your arm momentarily to fly up towards the target of the attack before returning to yourself and reattaching. This is another item that plays with certain mechanics that aren't normally played, but do exist as optional rules in the DMG under lingering injuries and massive damage. In this case, we're talking about characters with missing limbs. While it is normally harder and often less convenient for other players if not handled well, for a character to be played with a missing arm or leg, the Arcane Propulsion Arm is a great way to lend a helping hand to a character who may have lost their own recently during combat or some other incident. And it also comes with many uses as well, with the most notable one being that it's a weapon that you can basically carry anywhere you want without fear of having it confiscated or needing to hide it for anything, since it would probably seem strange for a guard to want to confiscate a vital part of your body. The arm itself also deals good enough damage that it isn't entirely useless either if you ever find yourself without any of your main ways of attacking enemies. There isn't really much to say about this magic item, since it basically does just function like a regular arm, except for the fact that you can use it to rocket punch someone from a distance away as a show of force when you're ready to literally throw hands with them. But it deserves to be on this list since it's one of the few items in the game that can actually enhance the experience of a campaign where missing limbs are at stake, outside of the conventional prosthetics that are normally available. While this item is weird, it is weird in a way that can add a lot of character uniqueness to someone who might be struggling to help out their fellow party members, while also giving that player something to make them stand out from just normal prosthetics. And at number 5, we have Abracadabrus. This is a magical chest that holds 20 charges, which can be expended one at a time in order to conjure any number of non-magical objects that can fit inside, by having a creature use their action to touch the closed lid of the chest. The overall total of the objects you name must not exceed 1 gold, and once you name all the items you wish to appear in the chest, those items will be the only things in the chest. These charges recharge at a rate of 1d20 per dawn, and if you expend them all, you roll a d20 to see if the chest loses its magic for rolling a 1. Once that happens, then the chest becomes ordinary and its gemstones are reduced to ashes. And the kinds of items you can obtain from this chest are basically endless. You can obtain fully prepared food out of the Abracadabrus that spoils after 24 hours if not consumed, or obtain raw materials or ingredients for your own purposes, or even gemstones and precious metals. However, these disappear after 1 minute. Otherwise, everything that gets conjured inside the chest is 100% authentic and can probably even be sold for a small profit. In terms of what size items you can make, well, the chest weighs 25 pounds while it's empty, and its interior compartment is a cube which measures 1.5 feet on each side, so you won't be able to conjure a goat or a javelin from the chest. This is one of those items you might want to have with you simply for the convenience factor of having everything you'll need for the road ahead, assuming you have a way to carry the chest with you or otherwise have easy access to it. And there are plenty of items that cost 1 gold or less that you can make that are even useful for adventuring. Most ammo types such as crossbow bolts and darts are sold for very cheap, making this an easy way to restock some of your spent ammunition that you might not have been able to get back. There are plenty of ingredients you can choose from it if your character has a knack for cooking meals on their own, or if your party encounters an NPC that's not in a good state. The Abracadabrus can very well provide all the means you need to get the NPC back on their feet without having to expend any of your own resources. All in all, this item is a perfect item to give to your adventurers so they don't have to worry about not having the bare necessities for whatever small or big job they might be attempting. An artist will always have access to art supplies, a drinking man his tankard, etc, etc. As for the reason why this item takes number 5 on this list, it's because out of all the items to make it on this list, the Abracadabrus is strange in that there are very few items in the game that can just create something out of nothing. Even Nolzur's marvelous pigments turn ink into something else despite the peculiarities of the item itself. And at number 4, we have the Bag of Devouring. This item is basically a bag of holding if it were a mimic, and does the opposite of holding objects. To be more specific, while the bag resembles the well-known item that every adventurer loves to have, the Bag of Devouring is actually a feeding orifice for a giant extra-dimensional creature that will consume any animal or vegetable matter placed wholly inside the bag and is lost forever. And if a living creature were to reach into the bag itself, there's a 50-50 chance the creature will get pulled inside of it. When that happens, the creature can attempt to escape the bag by using their action to make a DC 15 strength check. However, if they fail and start their turn inside the bag, then they're devoured, destroying the body in the process. Luckily, another creature can attempt to pull the creature out, but has the same repercussions as reaching into the bag. But if the creature doesn't get pulled in too, they can attempt to pull their friend out by passing a DC 20 strength check. So there is a little bit of leniency and time to try and get one of your party members out of the bag if they happen to mistake this item as a normal bag of holding. The bag itself can't hold nearly as much as a bag of holding if you want to store inanimate objects, as the bag can only hold a cubic foot of material. But if you do decide to store something inside, then the bag will swallow up any items stored within once a day and spit them out in another plane of existence that's determined by your DM. And if the bag is either pierced or torn, it's destroyed and transports anything inside of it to a random location on the astral plane. For the most part, there is pretty much no reason to ever carry around one of these bags, since all it does is eat whatever it's put inside of it, or loses valuable items that you might otherwise want to keep. This item would mainly only be useful for a DM to use as a way to construct a scenario or plot point around it. For example, a conniving NPC might trick the party into thinking they've been given a bag of holding as a fake reward, which can lead into the party wanting revenge on the NPC that gave it to the party in the first place. Or the bag could be the lead culprit in the town's sudden disappearance of some of their residents. But it's definitely not a reward item to give to players, nor is it a cursed item that can simply be purged and made usable. However, if you're running a chaotic evil campaign of sorts, then the Bag of Devouring might actually be a good item to have in order to play pranks on people. Or if a player doesn't want to get in trouble for accidentally murdering someone, they can hide important evidence inside the bag, which will then be lost in another plane. But in terms of overall general usefulness, the Bag of Devouring is a peculiar magic item that would normally do more harm to your party than good, especially if you happen to actually have a bag of holding with you, which is why this item takes number 4 spot on this list. And coming to number 3, we actually have 2 items that tie for its weirdness. The first one is the Heartstone, which is a black gem used by night hags in order to become ethereal while on their person, but can also cure any disease with a single touch, and it takes 30 days to craft a Heartstone. As for the second item, we have the Soul Bag, which allows a night hag to catch souls of evil individuals that die as a result of the night hag's nightmare haunting ability. The bag can only hold 1 evil soul at a time, and requires a human sacrifice and 7 days in order to craft a new one. Like certain items in the game, there are few that require very specific creatures to use them. Mind Lash is a good example of one of those items, as it requires a Mind Flayer in order to use the magical effects of the weapon, which is very hard to accomplish outside of very specific and niche circumstances that could also apply here. Artificers and Thief Rogues acquire features at 14 to 13 levels respectively that allows them to ignore any class, race, and level requirements of magic items that they come across, including Mind Lash, Heartstone, and technically the Soul Bag. Although there isn't really any way for players to use Nightmare Haunting since that's purely a night hag ability. However, with the way the Heartstone is worded, one could easily assume that the touch of a Heartstone cures any disease effect could also work on anyone that came into contact with the stone rather than only the night hag. Meanwhile, the first part about allowing a night hag to become ethereal seems to imply that it only applies to the night hag who holds the stone. But if you are an appropriately leveled thief or artificer, you technically can just enter the ethereal plane whenever you want to too. However, because this item has no limits on its use for such a powerful effect, it might be appropriate to tie some detrimental effects or risks for using a Heartstone while not on a night hag. Maybe you slowly start to feel the effects of becoming a night hag the more you use it, or end up feeling other psychological or physical effects from repeat use. Maybe the Heartstone has a chance to lose its powers the more you use it, with a higher chance to break as time goes on. There's also a line of text for the Night Hag, which describes Night Hag's items that possess the states that if they lose either of those 2 objects, then they'll go to great lengths to retrieve it, since a lot of time and effort went into creating these 2 items in the first place, which might be an interesting plot point if you decide to take either item rather than looting them from her corpse. But while these items are definitely on the stranger side of what players could obtain, they're not the only items that function this way, as we've seen before with Mindlash. And while these aren't technically on loot tables like many other magic items are, they are still obtainable under specific circumstances, meaning that players are able to find these items in the appropriate settings. But just like the items similar to Mindlash, the concept of magical items being available to specific creatures that aren't inherently usable by players without very specific setups, or a true polymorph that can permanently turn someone into Night Hag to use the Heartstone to Sword Bag if they concentrate the spell for the full duration, is definitely on the weird side. And since this is a list of weird magic items rather than weird magic items that players could reasonably use, the Heartstone and Soul Bag are both qualified for this list, and are number 3 no less. And at number 2, we have the Speaking Stone. This item basically functions as a sending stone, a pair of smooth stones that can be used to communicate with someone else from a long distance away, like long-range walkie-talkies, but only to gnomes that have the mark of scribing. There are a couple of differences, however. Firstly, any creature within 5 feet of the stone hears the message in its mind as if they were the target, rather than the bearer of the second sending stone. And the second difference is that the Speaker Stone can technically send messages to multiple Speaking Stones at a time. So as long as they have the same sequence of symbols, and as long as they know the location of the other Speaking Stones too. But outside of these two key differences, there isn't really anything too special about the Speaking Stones. You also have to be a very specific race and subclass in order to even make use of a Speaking Stone, which is a definite qualifier for this list as shown previously. But the reason why this item takes number 2 spot on this list is because, at its core, it doesn't really do much that a few Sending Stones can't already do. While it might be more convenient in certain situations where an entire network of people need to be contacted in a hurry, the racial requirements basically keeps it from being useful to most party members, and is usually best reserved for NPCs that revolve around mark of scribing gnomes. And at number 1, we have the Lord's Ensemble. This is an item formed into 3 pieces of attire, a helm, amulet, and robe to form a singular piece of magical armor with various effects, but only within the city of Waterdeep and its sewers. It requires attunement by a creature that possesses a humanoid build, and is attuned as a single item rather than 3 separate attunements from 3 different set pieces. As for what each individual piece does, the Lord's Helm pretty much fully disguises your identity by concealing your entire head and face, while also masking your inner thoughts by blocking out any kind of magic that's used in order to read thoughts or determine your intent or whether or not you're lying. This helm also protects other creatures from knowing what kind of creature you are, and magically alters your voice to sound genderless. Lastly, creatures can only communicate with you telepathically if you allow them to. Essentially, this helm acts as a way to protect yourself from unwanted attention while also keeping your own identity a mystery while in the presence of other potentially powerful individuals that may seek to take advantage of information they should not know about. This is further enforced by the Lord's Amulet, which acts as an amulet of proof against detection and location, preventing creatures from using divination magic and making it so you can't be targeted by such magic. The Lord's Robe continues this trend by making it so it creates an illusion that you have a nondescript and androgynous humanoid build that stands 6 feet tall, allowing you to blend in with other masked Lords of Waterdeep. The robe also functions as a ring of free action, allowing you to traverse difficult terrain easily without using any extra movement, and grants you immunity to magic that reduces your speed or causes you to become paralyzed or restrained. This is an exceedingly powerful magical item that basically makes it so that no one can ever figure out who you are unless you go out of your way to do so. However, what keeps this item from being outright broken is due to the location restrictions this item has, where it can only be used within the city of Waterdeep and its sewers. While there are very reasonable and understandable lore reasons as to why this is the case, if your party decides to make use of the Lord's Ensemble, then this would be very useful information to know in case they want to plan around using it for their own purposes. However, the location restriction isn't exactly why this item takes number 1 spot on this list. The actual reason is due to the fact that, out of every magic item, the Lord's Ensemble is one of the only, if not the only, magical item that consists of 3 separate items, with each individual effects that all act as a single magic item when worn. And for 1 attunement slot, you get to have 3 different effects active at any given time, which all grant very beneficial effects in regards to concealing your identity and making you immune to certain kinds of magic to boot. If it weren't for the fact that you can only use a Lord's Ensemble in very specific locations, this magic item would definitely be a qualifier for one of the most broken items on this list. But since that's not the case, we'll just have to settle for this item being the strangest instead. Alright, and that's the list. What are some of your favorite magic items from the very rare category that you like to use? And do you have any ideas for future top 10 videos just like this one? If so, I'd love to put them down in the comments below. And take care.